All right, we are live. Keith Niebuhr and Nick Delatorre of Gators Online. This is Talking Gators, the Gators Online live show that we do pretty much every Sunday night. Sometimes we have other things going on in our lives. We bump it to Monday, but it's becoming a regular thing, a big tradition. What do we got here? I hear some noises.
Oh, it's probably this chair. I need a new chair in this office, man.
Nick, you've got some. Is that what I hear? This like thing backing up, or?
If it was squeaking, it's this chair. Oh, that's outside. That's outside. That's outside.
Okay. I'm like looking around. All right, we ready to go? All right, we're ready. We've launched. We're live.
You made me expose my chair for no reason.
I'm like looking around. What's going on?
Expose my chair.
Yeah. All right. So listen, we're going to talk about Florida Gators football today. Florida Gators football recruiting as well. Obviously, it's Georgia week. World's largest outdoor cocktail party is next Saturday in Jacksonville. But look, we can't get this show going without talking first, Nick, about yesterday's enormous recruiting pickup for the Florida Gators. 5-star defensive lineman / defensive end / edge, LJ McCrae of Daytona Beach, Maryland, committed to the Gators over Georgia, which I think is the big one, Florida State, Auburn, and Miami. And the reason, Nick, I say Georgia's the big one, you look what they've done recently on the defensive line. They've had the best defensive line in college football without question the last few years, and they've sent just one guy after the other to a big payday in the NFL. And they've also had success landing defensive linemen in the Sunshine State, much to the chagrin of Florida State, and Miami. But that's over with. LJ McCrae is a Gator. He's the number 8 recruit in the country, like I said, with On3. A special talent, Nick. So, again, here's a guy, Nick, that can play – 6'6", 275. So he could grow into a 3-technique kind of guy. He could be a big, strong side end. He could play edge. They got to get better at all those spots in the SEC. Nick, how big is this from a team perspective?
Yeah, well, first off, I never really hype up freshmen, but like Billy Napier is showing in year 1 and year 2. I don't care if you're a freshman, if you're an early enrollee, late enrollee, best guys are going to play. So looking at Florida, like I don't see a lot of guys leaving next year, maybe Princely Umealin, but like there's going to be opportunity to get guys in. You get Searcy back, you get Collins back. And I think if you're looking at a guy like LJ McCrae with his skill set, his talent, this is someone who, like McCrae and like Collins, I think can get on the field as a freshman. And at his size, it will be interesting to see. Does he stay at that size? You know, a lot of guys who are 17, 18 years old, they're 6'7", 300 pounds, are at 300 because they just wanted to get to a number, and then you end up losing some weight before building back on. It will be interesting to see. Does he end up on the edge where I think Florida's recruiting him at, or does he slide in as a 3-technique defensive tackle kind of guy? But certainly that versatility does not hurt you. Winning this kind of battle against Florida State, who's number 4 in the country right now, against Georgia, who you'll play on the field this week. And I went back, Keith, and since Kirby Smart has been there, other than his first class, has not had a recruiting class, lower than 3rd in the country. So that's what you're chasing. That's what you have to attain. And it's not fair to put up a second-year Billy Napier against what Kirby Smart has built for 9 years, but that's what you're chasing. That's your division rival.
Well, guess what? I mean, when Kirby Smart got to Georgia, they were chasing Alabama. Now, granted, not in the same division, but hey, look, we all have the the big boys.
The carrot on the stick that you're chasing.
Yeah, I mean, so a huge pickup for Florida. Look, 22. I'm trying to figure out what all the noise is, but 22 commitments, number 3 class in the country, hugely significant pickup. But Nick, you know some people in the NIL world related to the University of Florida. And people keep asking me, well, what does this say about Florida's NIL? And it's like, well, look, I don't know all the numbers. I'm not privy to all that. I don't know who got what deal and who didn't. But what I know is this: you're not landing 3 5-stars, which is how many Florida has committed right now, without the help of your NIL, without your NIL being in a good place. So to me, I think you can reasonably deduce that Florida's NIL is contributing and is in a good spot. And from what we hear, the Florida coaching staff has been very pleased with what the Florida NIL folks have done for this program. But what can you add to that?
Yeah, well, I think when we're talking recruiting, especially at the high school level, you might want to just Wink, wink, nod. Yeah. Hey, good NIL efforts. You don't want to say that that's how you're getting guys, because that'd be an inducement and against NCAA rule, whether the NCAA rule has any effect or not, or if they're a toothless organization. It does say to me that, the biggest thing when talking about NIL, at least to me, outside of like paying players, when you're on a visit and you're with, a Jordan Castell, or you're with a Prince Umailin, or you're with a Derek Wingo, Trevor Etienne. Hey, Florida has, what's NIL look like here? And when the guys are talking to you like, hey, these are the opportunities. These are through Florida Victorious or through whatever means, this is how I'm getting paid, how I'm being taken care of. And I think that's probably the biggest thing, because if you have a bunch of guys in the locker room who are like, hey, man, these checks are bouncing, the opportunities just aren't there. I'm not talking to, I'm a senior, probably not going to play in the NFL, and I'm not talking to any Gator alumni that own businesses who are telling me that, hey, well, you can come work for me, or networking in that way. I think that'd be an issue, but I don't see that at Florida since the Gator Collective was absorbed, sold, whatever they want to call it, at by Florida Victorious. I think you see the support from Billy Napier, from Todd Golden, from everyone at the UAA, really getting behind it. And we're at a point now where, last year at this time, you were still trying to educate boosters who, if they were around in the 80s, Keith, were told like, hey, we were on probation. We can't pay players. What are you talking about? And you're having to educate them to be like, hey, listen, maybe send some of that money that you were going to send to Gator boosters, take a piece of that and put it into Florida Victorious or into an NIL effort, because you can do this now. And not only can you have to be able to do that to keep up. I mean, I'm watching Clemson last night just look terrible. And this is a guy, Dabo Sweeney, who hates the transfer portal openly, won't use it, and doesn't like NIL. And you're seeing what Clemson, who used to be a big, mighty program, looks like down in, not in Coral Gables, because that would be an on-campus stadium for Miami, but down in Miami Gardens, in the rented stadium that they play in.
Well, Nick, look, it was a monumental pickup. I don't think there's any question about that. Recruiting wins ultimately should, by theory, lead to on-field wins. But like you said, Georgia's they're at the mountaintop of college football right now. So beating them at anything in football is significant right now. So again, another big win for Florida. In fact, one of our colleagues asked me, where would I put this in among Billy Napier's biggest recruiting wins at Florida? Well, he hadn't been at Florida for very long, but I think DJ Lagway, number one, again, for kind of the same reasons, the perception, the national perception, who you beat. For DJ Lagway, they beat Southern Cal and Lincoln Riley, quarterback guru, and they beat Clemson. And also you have the fact that it's such an important position, the quarterback position. But LJ McCrae, I mean, elite player, look who you beat. He can help the team. It just sends a signal to the college football world that Florida, they mean business. Now you got to go out and win games, and it's not always. Some of these recruits have been just like great, like I think just great job by the staff recognizing talent and going out and maybe being the first on a guy like TJ Searcy. He wasn't lightly recruited by any means. I think Georgia wanted him, but I think that was just a great scout on Florida's part, and then got on him a little bit earlier. But LJ McCrae is not that. And if you want to beat Georgia on the field, you have to beat Georgia on the recruiting trail first. Yeah. And they have a head start. I mean, we keep hitting the reset button every 3-4 years here, and then you have to catch up and restart over. So I just think the job Billy Napier has done with this class, specifically this defensive class, has been tremendous this offseason. And Nick, we love to get into rankings and ratings of guys, but the reality of it is, to me, even more important than that is, who did you legitimately beat? Sometimes you say, that kid had 37 offers. Okay, but he couldn't have committed to Georgia. He couldn't have committed to Alabama. He couldn't have committed to Florida State. LJ McCrae could have committed to any school in the country. Okay, DJ Lagway could have probably committed to any school in the country. So that's much more significant than saying, we got a 5-star, we got a 4-star. Who did you beat? Okay, and so what we're seeing in this cycle is, you look at Florida. By the way, Nick, they have 7 top 100 recruits. 3 5-stars, and 7 top 100 recruits. Who did you beat? Well, let's take a look at Aaron Childs, the linebacker from Maryland. Michigan was one of his finalists. Nasir Johnson, now Florida's got to hold on for him, but they beat out FSU and Georgia for him, a defensive lineman. Amaris Williams, another player, an edge player that Florida's got to hold on to, but they beat out Penn State. Now Ohio State's pushing. You're now back in the picture recruiting with the big boys. The days of plucking a guy away from FIU in South Florida are over. That's not going to happen under this regime. Yes, they'd love a diamond in the rough here or there, but you don't win SEC titles with classes with more than 1 or 2 diamonds in the rough. Okay. I know they've got a staff full of great evaluators. Well, guess what? So does everybody else. Okay. You're fishing from this, and they're good people, by the way, and smart people working over at Gators headquarters, but you're fishing from the same pond. So you want to get those great evals early, which they're doing, get in on guys early, build a relationship. Hope your NIL is in order, and hope your product on the field matches up with the vision you're selling recruits, proof of concept. And all those things seem to be working right now for Florida. Now, look, they got a tough schedule, Nick. It's not going to get any easier, but right now things are heading in the right direction. Gator Swag, we'll take a couple questions, and then just so everybody knows, Jake Rowe of Dogs HQ, longtime Georgia Bulldogs reporter, is going to join us for about 10, 15 minutes tonight, just to kind of get us hyped up for this game. But Gator Swag says, who could be next to commit? Maybe Mekhi Burrow, the defensive lineman who was previously committed to Florida, decommitted from Florida, visited recently, and now maybe back again a couple more times. I don't know if there's going to be any more commitments between now and signing day. They may all be right around then. Another guy to keep an eye on is Gregory Smith, the safety that's really rising fast from the Tampa area. Florida offered him a couple weeks ago, Nick, but boy, now he's hearing from A&M. He's hearing from Oklahoma, Ole Miss, a lot of schools. He's got visits set up, and he'll officially visit Florida on December 8th. I think Florida's in the driver's seat right now. But look, there's a lot of hay in the barn. You got 22 commitments. They may only take 3, 4, 5 more guys, save the rest of the spots for the portal. So I don't know that there's necessarily going to be a bunch of commitments soon. Right now, more than anything, the staff has to hold on to what they have. Whether you're winning or losing, when you're recruiting high-level players, people are trying to poach them at all times. Again, Jamonte Waller, your edge/inside linebacker, visited Auburn this weekend. Amaris Williams, your standout edge, who's having an unbelievable season up in the North Carolina, that Fayetteville region. He's having a big-time season. He officially visited Ohio State this weekend. These are concerns, but they're always going to pop up. Kids are not going to stop taking visits just because they commit to you. So a lot of work still to be done. Nick, let's just start getting into this Florida-Georgia game. Georgia, number one in the country, 2 straight national titles, 7-0, 4-0 in the SEC. You're talking about wins over South Carolina, not that impressive, 24-14. Only beat Auburn by 7 at Auburn. Rivalry game, though. Didn't look great against Vanderbilt, beat them by 17. But the one time they seemingly had their manhood tested was the week after Kentucky really beat the heck out of Florida. And Kentucky went to Athens, and people thought, is this the year? Could Kentucky be that physical team? Yeah, exactly. And they were absolutely slaughtered in Athens. I mean, look at the total stats. First of all, Georgia won 51-13, 33 first downs to 12, Nick, 608 yards to 183, 435 yards passing by Carson Beck, who Gator fans know well. I mean, it was an absolute bloodletting. And by the way, Georgia didn't force a turnover in that game, Nick. They just beat the hell out of them at the line of scrimmage and, quite frankly, everywhere else. Nick, to me, this looks like a Georgia team, maybe not as good all around as the last 2 Georgia teams, but they seem to have that ability to turn on that light switch when they needed to this year. They needed that big drive against Auburn. They got it. They needed to show something against Kentucky, and they just dominated them. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and Georgia's won 40 of their last 41 games, 24 in a row. They beat Florida, I think, definitely the last 3 years.
Florida won in 2020. 2020,
yeah. No Brock Bowers this week is a great win for Florida. Last year, to no surprise, as much as whatever you feel about, Ventrell Miller and Amari Burney, they were never going to cover Brock Bowers. A lot of people in the NFL won't cover Brock Bowers very well. But he went off, caught 5 passes for $154 and a touchdown last year. Not having him is great. And I think a lot of Florida fans are looking at Georgia and saying they're not as good as they were. And look, they struggled against South Carolina. They struggled against Vanderbilt. And to that, I would say, okay. But like what you just said, Keith, the one time, like this is a team when you're at this level, especially when you get younger guys who maybe can really help those teams, I guess you could say, those national championship teams. You come in and you start feeling like, man, we're just better than everyone. We can just walk into a place and win. And you don't see what it took to build where you are and what it takes to maintain that. When Georgia was told, hey, you're not good enough, this Kentucky team could knock you off, they showed who they really are. So I think you got a motivated, focused, ready to play Georgia team against Kentucky versus maybe just like rolling the ball out and we'll win just because we're Georgia versus some other teams. There's no chance in hell that Georgia shows up in Jacksonville with that kind of mentality. If you go back and listen to Kirby Smart's leaked halftime speech from a couple of years back, or maybe that was last year, this game is deeply personal to him. And there's no way Georgia is overlooking Florida or even taking a bad Florida team, which I don't think it's a bad Florida team. They're not taking a bad Florida team lightly. Georgia's,
But we got Jake Rhodes going to join us in a minute from Dogs HQ. So I wanted to get this one recruiting question out of the way. Mr. Bird says, do you think Florida can sway wide receiver TJ Moore of Tampa Catholic from Clemson, or do you think ultimately they will sign him? Right now, it's going to be a tough flip. Clemson does not let their guys visit other schools. He is not visiting anywhere else. He has said he's not going to visit anywhere else. Florida's trying to chip away. They went by his school last week. As of right now, we haven't heard of Florida making any traction. And if they are, it's going to be kept real quiet. If he does anything, it's going to be really secretive. I can assure you that. But right now, we've not heard.
I talked about the Clemson downfall, Keith. When Clemson starts losing commits, that's when we got to put Dabo on watch.
We got a special guest. Look at this. Oh. Look at this Georgia redneck. My good friend. My good friend Jake. I mean, I love it. I love it. My good friend Jake, he's the paradox. Okay, a paradox of all paradoxes. Super Southern guy, fantastic guy. You wouldn't think he'd be a golf nut, and he's got a Masters hat on. I picture you more as a catfish. I don't know, whatever.
Yes, dude. Listen. I'm in for it all. I mean, let's not pretend like the Masters isn't as Southern as biscuits and gravy.
That's right.
Though, right?
That's right.
So, but no.
And Jake's not a redneck, by the way. I was just kidding. Let me point that out. Okay.
Whatever.
Okay.
I've got all the good qualities.
Let's see what color it is there.
Jake,
now, real quick question for you, off topic here. I watched Wright Thompson last year, and the pimento cheese sandwiches on the grounds there in Augusta are not the original recipe anymore.
First of all, not my thing. I'm there's something about, there's like one pimento cheese in the entire world that I like, and it's not, you can't even buy it on the shelves. It's like one of my wife's friends' moms makes it. It's just a little weird for me. But I don't know about the recipe. I do know the egg salad though is my jam. I eat it just one right after the other, and it's pretty awesome. Cheap beer, cheap foods, fun.
Jake, Nick's been to the Masters too. I'm the only one of us three. I'm like the diehard golfer of the group, and I've not been to the Masters.
Well, listen, man, I've been so lucky. I've got a good connect. Maybe here in the next couple of years we can make it happen.
Well, you need to go. I go to the Open. I always go to the Open over in Scotland or Northern Ireland or whatever. And but anyway, enough of the golf talk.
We can do some trades.
We got world's largest outdoor cocktail party talk. Jake, in your formative years, how old are you? What are you, 35?
I am 40.
Okay. You took a lot of beatings. The team you cover took a lot of beatings in your younger years. And lately, Georgia sort of seized control of this rivalry again. But I ask you this before we get going. Look, this is a great team. Unbeaten, number one in the country. Is this team, from what you've seen right now, as good as the last two Georgia teams? And if not,
no, this team's a lot more vulnerable. This team is it's shown more vulnerability. The one elite trait that I think this team has is they just kind of turn it on when they need to turn it on, and I'm not so sure that's not going to catch up to them at some point, but thus far that's what we've seen. I mean, they've kind of played their best ball when their best ball was needed. And it kind of trickles out of what, kind of not trickles out, but it kind of proves what kind of trickled out of preseason camp when, Kirby Smart before one of the scrimmage says, hey, listen, I don't know that, we're a little young and I don't know if this is the most talented team I've had at Georgia. He said, but it is the team with the best leadership. And so they're really good at circling the wagons and figuring it out. But ultimately, much more vulnerable, slow starts. Situational football is not great all the time. They're excellent on third down. They're kind of bad in the red zone. On both sides of the ball is the thing. That defensively, that's kind of where they're at. So, if you can get it inside the 20 on this defense, you can score touchdowns. And they're not as dominant defensively. They're still very good. So I think it's definitely more vulnerable. And they're fortunate, in my opinion, that, the early part of the schedule was as easy as it was, and B, that college football is as wide open as it's ever been. Because if there were 2 or 3 dominant teams out there in college football, I think Georgia would you could probably feel a lot worse about maybe giving a chance to three-peat.
Nick's going to take over, but I wanted to ask one more real quick. Is that okay, Nick? Jake, this Georgia staff's got a lot of former Georgia players. A couple of guys I know really well, Mike Bobo and Will Muschamp. And if you're a Florida fan, you're thinking, okay, maybe there's a chance. But is there any chance at all that a Georgia team would ever overlook a Florida team?
I have a hard time with it, especially with that bye week. A lot of folks, that bye week, man, you kind of get a chance to tear them down one more time. The coaches, they just love it. They just, they're short, their pants get shorter at the opportunity of just, hey, let's tear these guys down. Let's do fall camp for a couple days. And, I don't think so, man. I really don't, especially not after, the way they just got backhanded and forehanded and punched in the face a couple years ago. When Dan Mullen ran wheel route after wheel route and just gashed them. So I think they'll always remember that.
Yeah, it seems just listening to, I think Kirby Smart probably leaked his own halftime speech because that got me fired up. But it's so deeply personal to Kirby. There's no shot. There's no shot. Florida could have an 85 scholarships taken away from them, be playing a team full of walk-ons, and Kirby would be like, cool, let's win 200-0.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Kirby just, like you talked about my formative years. You brought up Will, there's Kirby, there's Brian McClendon, who didn't have a whole lot of success. There's Mike Bobo, who had even less success when you consider head coach. Not head coach, but offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach, player. Lost so many games to Florida. It's personal for the whole staff. And, I know that, this is always a big one, man. It always is. And like I said, that bye week, that atmosphere, it may not matter. I still think Florida can play with Georgia if Georgia goes out there and just plays solid football. I think Georgia's got to basically play its A+ game to just kind of run away from decent teams.
Yeah, I would like also. So I got to Florida, covering Florida in 2013. So it's been pretty terrible since I've been here. I would just like to talk to you about how we both look at the word vulnerable differently. Because I was looking up at Georgia, scoring defense, 14 points a game, first in the SEC. Rushing defense, 91.43, first in the SEC. Passing defense, 171 yards, first in the SEC. Total defense, first in the SEC. Best third down defense. So I'm just wondering, where is Georgia vulnerable? Because it doesn't seem like Florida will have a ton of offensive success.
Well, you are probably right. And listen, for any Florida fan watching this, I want you to understand that I think Georgia can lose to Florida. I think Georgia can lose a couple down the stretch. I really do. But when I look at this team, I am kind of coming through the prism of what was the past 2 years.
Sure.
In the past 2 years, Georgia was tremendous in sudden change. Turnovers. Well, Georgia's turned it over, I want to say 6 times in its last 5 games, or last 4 games, and 5 of those have turned into touchdowns. Georgia, they're not doing a very good job in sudden change. They're not doing a very good job in the red zone. If they don't intercept you, they can't turn you over. They haven't forced a fumble and got on a fumble all year long. They're also turning it over at a fairly high rate. They've got an even turnover margin, which is not the worst, but it's not, a recipe for winning. And ultimately there are stretches of games where they don't play very good football. They just don't. They get off to slow starts like they did against Vanderbilt, where they, allow a touchdown. They're more prone to blowing a coverage or to missing a run fit and allowing a big play. It's just all those things. They're more vulnerable than they have been, for sure. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of where where I'm coming from on that.
And when I'm looking at, we were just talking recruiting and talking about Florida winning a battle over Georgia. when I look at Georgia and Florida in this matchup, I think is the biggest difference will be along the offensive lines, along the lines, offensive and defense. But then I look at Georgia, and it's kind of like Florida, like one of the worst tackle for loss teams in the conference, right there with Florida. And then only Florida has less sacks than Georgia does, which to me is, with the guys that they have, the recruits and the studs they have, was surprising. What do you think, or why do you think maybe Georgia isn't finishing? I'm sure they're getting pressure, but not getting those sacks and tackles for loss.
Yeah, Georgia's odd in that way. They're good at affecting the quarterback. I think a guy Clark Brooks over at SEC StatCat, I was looking the other day. I think Georgia was second or third in the SEC in pressure rate, which is great. That's awesome. But at the same time, they're not great at getting home. And you brought up a really good point there. They're not great at finishing. Peyton Thorne, they had a couple opportunities against him when they played against Auburn. Didn't get it done. They've had some other opportunities where they've missed some wide open looks at sacks and just haven't gotten there. I think some of it is Georgia doesn't really put a high emphasis on getting up the field on first and second down. They play that mint front. They're going to strike blockers. They're going to control blockers. They're going to try and keep you from running inside zone and duo at them and setting up your play action and your RPO game. They feel like, hey, listen, if we can control this up front with our front four, then you're going to kind of get out of your game. You're going to feel, they're going to have to react less to play action and things of that nature. And, ultimately they're right. It does end up kind of taking its toll as the game goes on. But I think a lot of it is that they don't really try to play in the backfield a whole lot, and they don't try to shoot gaps and get free of blocks as much as they try to strike blockers and try to maintain those blocks. And listen, I think Florida's probably doing some of the same stuff. I don't think they're quite doing it at a high level just yet because they're still trying to get the personnel. But listen, you don't go out and get that behemoth nose tackle that Florida's got if you're not sitting there thinking, let's eat space, let's control gaps, let's keep. Listen, Austin Armstrong's from the same tree, same family there. So it's all about kind of controlling the run game on first and second down and making teams one dimensional.
And Florida fans, our members of Gators Online, very familiar with Carson Beck, especially immediately after he announced his commitment and then his comments towards Florida. He's had to kind of sit and wait. What has been through 7 games, your outlook on Carson Beck? Is he living up to what we thought he'd be as, I think he was a 5-star quarterback? And how is he handling, driving this Maserati around college football?
Well, the Maserati's got, it's missing a key component right now in Brock Bowers, but
yeah.
I listen, I think Carson Beck, and I'm going to use a word here that's kind of odd. I think he's a machine, and I don't think he's necessarily like this quarterback, big play stud machine yet. I mean, I think he's going to probably get there, but to me, in a lot of ways, he goes as he is operated and what he's allowed to do. And I think when Georgia has gotten him into a rhythm and they've worked the middle of the field and they've thrown it past 15, 20 yards consistently early on to get him going, they have played their best offensive football. But when they are dinking and dunking and trying to run to set up the pass and things of that nature, they've struggled a little bit. It's been kind of more of a body blows. Let's wear him down a little bit before he can get going. It's almost like Carson kind of gets cold or gets bored doing that, and it takes him a little while to get back on track. So he's had some really good games. I mean, the Tennessee game, Tennessee missed some chances in that game to get in it offensively, but they had no answer for Carson Beck in that game. I mean, he dominated them from start to finish. And honestly, Georgia did a lot of the same stuff to them that Florida did that Florida just didn't hit. Like Florida had deep over routes to Ricky Pearsall and other guys. I watched that game closely, and they just missed some opportunities against Kentucky that would have probably kept them in that game early. Georgia hit those opportunities and it eventually took Kentucky out of its game plan. So I mean, I think Carson Beck's a really good quarterback. He's been surprisingly good athlete. He moves incredibly well in the pocket, and while he hasn't been great, beyond 25, 30 yards, he hasn't been hitting the deep ball very well. Between 10 to 25, he's lethal. He's very, very accurate. He's done a really good job in that range.
Nick, do you have any more questions? I got one more, but I want to.
Yeah. I just have one more.
right.
Listen, there is. I warned Florida fans last year about Brock Bowers. Florida didn't have really athletes at linebacker. There is no one player that you plug in and you fill in Brock Bowers' production. That player doesn't. Maybe it's Kyle Pitts, but he's playing in Atlanta, and they're the best. Atlanta's offensive coordinator is the best defensive coordinator I've ever seen against Kyle Pitts. What does Georgia do offensively? Because especially for a first-time starting quarterback, a tight end like Brock Bowers is such a safety valve. What does Georgia do? What do they turn to offensively to fill that void?
Well, I think that number one, Oscar Delp is not Brock Bowers, but he is capable of winning those one-on-one battles. So, if you do want to try to work on him with a linebacker, or, they can create mismatches with him, nowhere near as many as they could with Brock Bowers. See, Georgia had this luxury with Bowers. They line up in 12 personnel, and it was like, good luck, man. This is, you're going to have to play this like it's 11 personnel. You're going to have to play 3 wide personnel. I mean, teams couldn't go heavy. They couldn't play base defense against too tight. They couldn't treat it like it was 2 back. If Georgia lined them up in the backfield, they had to play kind of, Georgia was able to kind of dictate some stuff with personnel with him in there. They won't be able to do that as much. But I still think that they can still take advantages of Oscar Delp and his athleticism. He's still a really talented tight end, just not, I don't think it's insult to anybody to say they're not Brock Bowers. And then you're going to go to kind of the slot guys. I mean, the good news for Georgia here, and the timing of it all, or the positive that comes out of it, is the fact that they went into the bye week and they've got a chance to kind of adjust and go from an 11. I don't know what that was all about. Some 11 personnel. Keith's got some balloons coming over at his place. I guess he's got a party coming later.
I have no idea what just happened.
Yeah, Candy and Shelby and those guys are going to be dropping by with police uniforms.
Celebrating that big recruiting win yesterday, Jake. Maybe
yeah, but Dominic Lovett and Ladd McConkey are 2 guys that I would look to as well, because Ladd has been kind of trying to play himself back into shape after missing those first 4 games of the season, getting through the bye, getting a chance to get a little extra conditioning, I think helps him there. And Georgia, they're just more formidable this year than they have been the last 2 at wide receiver, with Lovett, with McConkey, with Ra Thomas on the outside, with Marcus Rosemy-Jackson on this outside. Arian Smith's in a bit of a slump right now. He's dropped like 3 passes in his last 4 games. It's never really happened to him at Georgia like that. Of course, he's never been healthy for long enough for it to happen to him like that at Georgia. He's healthy, and I think if he can come out of it, he can create some. But it's going to be a by committee deal, and it starts with just kind of being able to run the football and whatever it takes to get there, which is throwing it first or running or coming out and running it, wearing them down. It doesn't matter. They're going to have to get ready to run the football, because I know that's been something that's been a little bit been a little troubling for Florida of late, with starting with Kentucky, and then Vanderbilt even had a little bit more about the same amount of success that they normally have. And then, South Carolina, I know most of it was a couple of chunk plays, but they even had some success. And Georgia's going to have to try to figure out a way to have some success against that Florida run defense.
Jake, last thing from me here, and then we'll let you get back to your life. But, Florida, big recruiting win yesterday, and Georgia was one of the teams they beat. We're starting to see down here some more significant recruiting wins for Florida, like we used to see 5, 10, 15 years ago. What's the vibe? What's the feeling in Athens right now? How closely are they watching Florida's recruiting success? Because quite frankly, Georgia has the number 1 class right now. So as well as Florida's recruiting, having the number 3 class, Georgia's still got the number 1 class. Doesn't look like they've missed a beat. But is there some concern, some level of better keep an eye on these guys down in Gainesville? It looks like they're figuring this recruiting thing out. What's the vibe up there?
Well, I think they expected it. You go from a guy like Dan Mullen, who didn't prioritize recruiting like you have to prioritize recruiting in this league, to Billy Napier, who has coached with some of the best as far as that goes. And I think they knew Billy was going to put a big emphasis on that. And I think they respect it. I mean, obviously, when you start looking at I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. I've never heard it, but the safety kid out of Texas, that they're big. Georgia was big on him, and Florida got him. Georgia needs safeties in this class, and you look at McCrae. I mean, Georgia wanted some 5 techniques in this class. And listen, while they've done a really good job, I think Joseph Jonah Ajayi is one of the best players in the country. Me personally, I've thought that since, I didn't think Georgia was going to have a shot at him. And they've, got Justin Green, but, I mean, come on, man. I mean, LJ McCrae is a big time prospect. So I think ultimately what Georgia fans are going to do, and they'll probably laugh at themselves, they'll do it too, is they're going to pick apart everywhere that Georgia's better than Florida right now in this recruiting class. They're going to look at like offensive line and some of those areas. And they're going to be like, hey, listen, Florida's still playing catch up here. They're still playing catch up there until Florida actually catches up. And I'm interested to see if it happens. I really am, because, you're looking at a tough stretch of the schedule right here. And, I think Billy Napier is a fantastic coach. I've never heard anything but great things about him, talking to Georgia high school coaches, talking to other people in this industry who know him well. They rave about this guy. And I think if there's anybody that's going to be able to do it, I think he's going to get able to do it. But can he do it fast enough? Can he do it without losing some capital on the, in terms of, I don't mean NIL capital. I mean, like, can he finish this season strong? Because you go in next week and I don't think anybody's going to really hurt, get after him if he loses to Georgia, right? I don't think anybody's going to get down his throat for doing that. But if you somehow maybe lose 3 games, maybe, 3 of the next 5 they play, I mean, that's going to suck. And people are going to think, they're not going to remember the fact that Florida came into the season with a 4.5 win over under. They're going to think about 3 out of 5 at the end of the season. That's how it goes. So I think he's doing a fantastic job. I know Georgia fans think he's doing a fantastic job. And, that little run they went on at linebacker earlier in the summer, I think caught everybody's eye.
All right.
Georgia fans are missing Dan Mullen.
Yeah, they are. They would much rather have Dan Mullen give them some layoffs.
Yeah. All right. Jake Rowe of Dogs HQ. That's our sister site with On3. Does a great job.
Whatever.
With
I think I heard Keith say our little sister.
No, I didn't say that.
Wearing diapers.
You said sister side. I said brother. Whatever. Doesn't matter.
Brother, sister. Yeah, exactly. Our how do you say, part of the On3 network. Jake's been covering Georgia a long time. Jake, when you said you were 40, that really freaked me out because I've known you since you were in your 20s. But before you go, I just want to show you a little bit of this right here.
Well,
hey, we're sitting in the same spot right now.
Yeah, we just both just choke. Yeah,
and we've got this Miami Dolphins fan and Nick up there. So
dude, listen, I don't want to derail your show, but taking 3 out of 4 in Chavez Ravine was the highlight of my season this year. So I really enjoyed that. So I don't even. I'm just. It's mind bending being a Dodger fan. But anyway, Jake Rowe.
Pay a bunch of money for that team.
Wow. Jake Rowe of Dogs HQ. Go check out his work. He's a great guy. Find him on Twitter too. Maybe you'll see him at the Masters, probably with one of those giant, you demand signs or something like that. Who knows? But Jake, thank you so much for stopping by. We appreciate it, man.
Yeah, I'll take it easy,
buddy. Yep. Nick, he's good, man. That was fantastic.
Great stuff from Jake.
Jake's a great guy, one of the nicest guys in the business. Not a redneck. I was just kidding. He's Southern, though. He likes his Nana pudding. I'm going to just tell everybody that.
I did have to give him a hard time because, he says vulnerable, and I'm like, all right, well, listen, there's I guess there's levels to vulnerability. Georgia's vulnerability is first time with a psychologist laying on the couch. We're not that vulnerable yet. We're just getting to know you kind of vulnerable.
I'm going to try to run through a few of these if we can. Liquid Flames, who's the most at risk for being flipped away from Florida? I think 2 guys that I'm watching closely. Starting with Amaris Williams, the edge, who officially visited Ohio State this weekend. And then Jamonte Waller. And I know there's some confidence at Florida that they're going to keep him, but 2 visits to Auburn in the last month. We follow the visits. So let's see here. We're still adding another. Are we still adding another running back to this class? They would like to. Still recruiting a few guys. Jaden Baugh is certainly a guy to watch. He's committed to Arkansas. I do think there's a very strong chance he's going to visit this year. By the way, he's from up in Jake's neck of the woods, Columbia High School in Decatur.
Here's something that might affect that, Keith. Cam Carroll has made his intention that he's coming back. So you'll have a senior Cam Carroll. People keep asking me, hey, does Montrell Johnson have the stats to leave? And I tell them, hey, you just want to get, as a running back, a position that is now devalued in the NFL, you just want to get to your second contract. So it doesn't make sense if you're Montrell Johnson to really come back, even if you're only going to be a 3rd, 4th round pick. As a running back, you're trying to get to your second contract where you can get paid. So that's something to watch. I know Cam Carroll plans on coming back to Florida, obviously ETN and Trayon Webb. And then if you have a 4th, if Montrell decides to come back, now do you need a second running back in this class? So there's always moving parts.
There are. Nick, we talked about this last week before the off week, but and I know, look, this is going to be a monumental challenge for Florida, but look, when you go through the history of this rivalry, Nick, there have been a lot of upsets, In 1985, Florida was number one in the country, Nick, number one in the country after beating Auburn the week before, and a Georgia team that I think I can look up the ranking right now, a Georgia team that was only ranked 17th, won by 21 points. Okay, there are upsets. Florida, Ron Zook has beaten top 5 Georgia teams. Almost every Florida coach in the last 50 years has. Even Doug Dickey had some upset wins over Georgia, but it's going to take a lot.
Treon Harris beat Georgia, baby.
There you go. But if you're Florida, if you're in that building over there, I don't even remember the name of it. Every building in Florida's got a name
Hefner.
Yeah, after somebody, and then 10 years after they die, the name gets changed to somebody else. But listen. If you're over in the Florida football facility right now, Nick, what are some things that give you some real reason, legitimate reason for optimism going into this week? What would it be? What would you point to?
Yeah, I think that's why I'm sitting here in my office and not in that building there, Keith.
You can come. Did you freeze? Did we lose you, Nick?
I might have.
I just see this frozen head. I don't know what's going on. We had the truck backing up earlier. We've lost Nick for a second. We're going to get him back. But we had the truck earlier. We had the balloons coming down. So while we're waiting for Nick to come back, let's see if I can get to some recruiting questions here. Let me get on through here. We're going to shuffle. People are asking who could be next to commit. And a few people have mentioned Jordan Seaton. So again, while we're waiting for Nick to come back, 5-star offensive tackle Jordan Seaton. What is the latest? And Nick's logging out, logging back in. What's the latest on Jordan Seaton, 5-star offensive tackle? He officially visited Oregon this weekend. He's already officially visited Alabama. I believe he took that visit in June. He's unofficially visited Tennessee and apparently plans to go back there for another visit. We know that DJ Lagway, when I was out in Texas a week or so ago, told me, hey, that's my number one guy. That's my number one target. I need that protection on the offensive line. We know that he had a good official visit to Florida. We know that he likes DJ Lagway. We know that he likes the 2 offensive line system with Rob Sale and Darnell Stapleton. So we think Florida has a chance with Jordan Seaton, the 5-star offensive tackle. Here we go. We got Nick back. Nick, you there?
Yeah.
I'm just talking about, let me finish my thought on Jordan Seaton real quick. We think Florida's got a shot with Jordan Seaton, but we know this one's absolutely going to go to the wire. We know that NIL is probably going to be a factor here. We know that other schools are entering the mix. Some are entering each week. Others are exiting. It's just a wild recruitment, but Florida has been on him heavy for a while and has really been a major factor in his recruitment for a while. So I think they may be in it for the long haul. We'll see. They've got a shot. All right, Nick. So a couple things. You got Nick. I know they call you Negative Nick, but you're not that negative. Sometimes. Give me a couple reasons for. Look, Graham Mertz. How about I give you some options? Graham Mertz is playing at a really high level. You've got some dynamic running backs who also can catch the ball out of the backfield. That gives you offensive versatility. You have the emergence of some pass-catching tight ends. You have an offensive line that has proven it can run block most of the time and seems to have found its footing in the pass-blocking game. All right? You've got a defense that, while struggling last week, still made big plays when it counted, a turnover at the end, a pressure here, a sack there. You have a team that now knows it can win away from the swamp. I know South Carolina's not that good, but Georgia only beat them by 10. So you now have at least some things coming together, young guys emerging. It looks like a team that's evolving and getting better. So I hand it over to you now. What gives you hope? What should they be pointing to? Because from what I'm told, Florida thinks that they have a legitimate shot in this game. They look, they know it's going to be tough, but they think they're going in with a team that could maybe somehow pull this thing off.
They should think that. It would be a huge issue if they didn't think that. I don't see it. I think Florida would have to play a perfect game, a 100 out of 100 on the midterm exam. They would have to win the turnover battle. They would need Georgia to have self-inflicted penalties. I don't think there's any shame. Like, listen, obviously it's going to feel bad if you're a Florida fan and Florida loses to Georgia on Saturday. It's going to feel bad. I think the things that you mentioned are encouraging. But if we're talking like Pokemon, Georgia is a fully evolved third-generation Pokemon, and Florida's like about to start evolving from level 1 to level 2. They're just not in the same places as a program right now. And it takes the recruiting that we talked about and led the show. It takes years of that, not just one really good class. You have to stack elite classes. Georgia hasn't had a class lower than 3 in 7 years, and that's who you're playing against. They're also getting guys from the portal. So, like, I don't see Florida winning on the line of scrimmage, offensively or defensively. So I don't know how much you'll run the ball on Georgia. And then if you're trying to just lean on the passing game, like, give Graham Mertz some more padding this week, specifically around his ribs. I just don't know offensively. I don't know what the game plan is offensively to score more points than Georgia. I just don't see Florida scoring 28, 31, 40 points against this Georgia team, which it might take to win.
Well, you're depressing the hell out of me, man. Listen, hey, so, okay, look, if you can't win, and I'm not saying they can't, but if I'm saying that if it turns out that Florida doesn't win this game, how important is it that they're at least competitive? Nick, I'm going to give you an example of this. This is why I think this is important. And this is before you were born. But when you go back to when Charlie Pell got to Florida, the 79 team was not any good at all. They had a ton of injuries, and they turned the team over to the freshmen. They didn't win a game, Nick. But in week 10, they played Florida State in week 10 that season, not week 11. In week 10, a Florida team that was 0-8-1 led an unbeaten Florida State team deep into the game, into the third quarter. Led them. I'm talking about a top 5 team was losing to a team that was 0-8-1. The next year, Florida State ultimately won that game. The next year, Florida went to Tallahassee and got even closer and nearly won. And after the game, Charlie Pell told the team, that's the last time you're going to lose to Florida State. And they went on to win the next 4 years. They made progress. They were competitive when they really weren't supposed to be. So how important is it that we see progress and we see competitiveness out of this Florida team?
Ultimately, that's what I'm looking for. If I'm sitting here and telling you that I don't see how Florida wins this game, then what am I looking for? I'm not looking for a bloodbath. I'm not looking for embarrassment. I'm looking for progress. Like, hey, Florida's going to be playing a bunch of young players. Georgia is too, but Florida's playing a bunch of young players. I think we watched them learn how to win big games against Tennessee. We watched them learn how to win last week on the road at South Carolina. Now those guys, the Collins, the Castells, the Eugene Wilsons, the Najee Harrises, they're going to learn what it feels like to go and play a Florida-Georgia game. This is one of my favorite games in college football, regardless of school, the neutral site aspect to it, playing in Jacksonville, playing in that stadium, the stadium being split half and half, just how nasty this rivalry is. I love every part of it, and you're going to have to feel that and experience it. So I want to see Florida play competitive, continue playing. Last week, they only had 6 penalties, didn't really shoot themselves in the foot like we had seen the last 2 times they hit the road. Show me that you've continued that. You have a whole bye week to get ready for Georgia, to work on yourself. So I just want to see competent football. And also, if you go down 14 points, 20 points, do you quit or do you sit there and are you still throwing punches, with black eyes in the 15th round? I want to see Florida compete with Georgia. Now, listen, if Georgia lets Florida hang around in this game and it's close, or Florida has a lead late, I've seen some weird stuff happen in Jacksonville. I don't expect this level of weirdness where Florida will win this week, but there's a bunch of positives you can take away for a young football program that's still learning how to win and finding its own place and its own footing.
Well, when you say you've seen some weird stuff in this game, imagine what somebody 80 years old says in reply to that, if there's any of them out there watching us. This has been a series marked by incredible upsets, huge wins, huge unlikely plays, unlikely heroes, stunning finishes. We think of Lindsey Scott, back-breaking passes, Kerwin Bell to Ricky Nattiel. It's been remarkable. When you look at the upsets that come to mind, it feels like that Georgia's had more of the more memorable upsets in the game, starting with 85, 75, 76. But I'll tell you, Florida's had its share of upsets too. But you're right. It's going to take a lot. Look, when Florida lost to Georgia in 2012, I think, Will Muschamp's second season, and that kept Florida from having a perfect regular season. Florida turned the ball. I think that Georgia won 17-9, and Florida was number 2 in the country. Florida turned the ball over four fumbles in that game and 2 interceptions. So 6 turnovers total. That's what it may take. It may just take one of those games that Georgia just can't do anything right. And by the way, that does happen. But if you're counting on it to happen, you're going to be disappointed more often than not. But it is a crazy series. I think if you're a young Florida team, you just kind of want to hang around as long as possible. Make it a 4-quarter game and hope for the best. Make it a 4-quarter game and hope for the best. Nick, what is the bigger? We talked about Georgia's offensive line earlier and how strong they are. What's the one player with Brock Bowers not playing? Who's the one player for Georgia that kind of scares you the most, or would concern you the most if you're Florida?
Yeah, I think like Jake said, Ladd coming back and rounding into shape. You'd think that missing 4 games, now he's played in a couple and had a full week back. That's a guy. I don't know that Georgia really scares me offensively. I just don't know that Florida will be able to get pressure on Carson Beck or affect him. Now, Florida really hasn't been able to force turnovers. Georgia has some. They also create some with their defense. I think that's something. If you can figure out a way to get pressure on Georgia and maybe get Carson Beck, who'll be making his first start in this Florida-Georgia game, to turn the ball over, the Gators will have a chance to get some good field position. It's just going to be tough. It's just a really big physical Georgia team. When I look at Georgia, when I ask about what's the game plan to score points, it better not be the game plan you took to Kentucky, because Georgia's a bigger, faster, stronger, supremely more talented version of that Kentucky team that whooped Florida in Lexington. So it'll be interesting to me talking with Andy Staples last week. He pointed to what Florida did in South Carolina and now passing the ball 48 times. And you've put that on tape. Is that going to be your new identity? Can it be your new identity? So to me, that'll be interesting. Can Florida hit some deeper passes as they did last week in South Carolina? They certainly pressed the issue. But maybe that Georgia secondary can be susceptible to a Ricky Pearsall, slot seam, or getting the ball to Arliss Boardingham in space. And certainly Trey Wilson will be a huge factor in the game, as he's going to be every time he's healthy for Florida.
I gotta make a comment here. Tawan Chisholm, this guy, he'll put up 100 comments. We appreciate it. This guy, you are the truth when it comes to commenting. By the way, if you like what we're doing, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment. We know we haven't been able to get to everything today. Somebody was complaining that this is turned into Georgia Online. No, we're just talking about the game. We're never going to sit here and just throw sunshine at you. We're going to give it to you what we think is really going to happen. But look, I think Florida is making some real progress, Nick. I'm seeing some real progress, and I think winning at South Carolina, I don't care what South Carolina did at Missouri. They're a different team at home. They still present an array of challenges. And they are also, when they went up to Missouri this weekend, they're a lot more banged up than they were even when they played Florida. That was a significant win. You beat Tennessee at home. That's a Tennessee team that can play with just about anybody in the country. But there are a lot of comments. So this is not the same Georgia team. We didn't get a chance to ask Jake this, Nick, but used to be they could get pressure with just 3 or 4 guys on the quarterback, but it seems like they're having to bring in extra guys to get pressure on the quarterback. So it's not the same Georgia defense we're used to. Nick, before we head out of here, this is a big week, another big week for Billy Napier. What do you think is kind of going to be his mindset this week? And I guess I don't know if this is coming out. I'm trying to get this question out. Just what do you think the vibe's like over at Gators HQ this week, headquarters? And how do you prepare a team for this big of a challenge? What do you tell the guys? What's he going to be like this week?
What Tawan says, Billy Napier is going to be clipping whatever I say this week, whatever I write this week. Show the team that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's never won a single game in the history of the world. But,
well, listen, rally around me and giving my opinion this week. I think, listen, the rallying cry, the message this week will be nobody except for us, nobody except for the people in this building think we can win, but nobody outside of this building knows what we've put in to be here. The sweat that we had in January, in February, over the summer, the 5 a.m. lifts, the 2-a-days. No one knows what we've put in. We can beat this team. That's going to be the message. And that's cool. But unfortunately, the coaching staff before you was completely negligent recruiting, and Georgia ran up the score on the recruiting trail. So I don't think this Georgia team is as good as the previous two Georgia teams. I also didn't think Florida was going to beat Georgia the last 2 years either. So, like, if I'm a fan, yes, I find comfort in saying that. For me, being an analyst and commentator, I don't think that matters.
Let me get to a couple comments here, and then we'll head out of here. But God, that was a weird cough. Robert Turner says, hey, Florida has to keep the penalties at a minimum, obviously. Yep. And win the turnover battle. Isn't it funny? Suppose Florida has 2 or 3 turnovers in the game and Georgia has 9 or 10. That could be the difference between 50 or 60 yards. Turnovers, pick 6, fumble in the end zone. There are special teams. Oh, God, did I say special teams? But look, Florida special teams didn't kill them last week. Nick,
they did have 10 on the field on the PAT, though.
Well, look, I mean, everybody's a critic.
The PAT was good.
Look, making progress. So, again, you've got to pull off an upset. We're not just talking about this game, but to pull off an upset period, you've got, if the ball's in your hands on an interception, you got to catch it. All right? So what we saw last night is we saw Duke trying to upset FSU in Tallahassee, up 3 inside the red zone, goes for it on 4th down, doesn't get it. FSU goes 95 yards. So instead of being a 10-point game or a 6-point game, FSU now has a lead, game over. And so you have to make the most of all of your opportunities to pull off an upset. Virginia, we don't think about North Carolina much, but that was a top 10-ish team losing to a Virginia team that I believe had 1 win and had no business upsetting North Carolina. They did everything they needed to do. They took care of the ball. They made plays. So that's what it takes. It takes a lot. Now, here's one last comment. Guy, appreciate the comment. Jake Rowe said that Georgia struggles in the red zone. If they kick field goals and Florida scores TDs and wins the turnover battle, you could get there. It just takes a lot of ifs combining. He's right about that. But it wouldn't be the strangest upset in the world. Nick, it wouldn't be the biggest upset in the world if Florida beats Georgia. They're going to lose to somebody someday, okay? And so if you're Florida, I think you just have to say it's our turn. It's us. It's going to be us. But anyway, Nick.
Georgia's 7th in the conference in red zone conversions. And let me see. And then opponent red zone conversions, they have just the 8th red zone defense. So Jake is right. Hit the nail on the head. Very mediocre red zone offense and defense.
I'm flipping all these things around. We're trying to get it to I keep putting the thing back up that says, we don't have a producer, everybody. This is just me doing this. But be sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment. Right now, Gators Online, $1 for 1 month. And we're going to have some other specials this week because of the enormity of this game. But $1 for 1 month of all the best team recruiting, intel, and insight, plus the best message board community in Gator Nation. So for Nick Delatorre, I'm Keith Niebuhr with Gators Online. Also, the truck that was backing up behind me wants to thank everybody. The balloons that somehow fell down while I was not talking, they were a big part of the show. But to all of you, we appreciate it. You guys have been Nick, we're getting unbelievable support. It's been fantastic. YouTube station's really growing. The site's really growing, gatorsonline.com. So thank you to each of you. We really mean it. Nick, great job as usual, man. We'll do it again in a few days, man. Take care.
Absolutely.
See you guys.